So this week I thought we would talk about some of the biggest mistakes that I see handmade businesses making, and this is kind of off the back of last week's video where I was sort of doing a tongue-in-cheek video about what works on Etsy now, and if you haven't watched it, I'll link to it at the end. Essentially everything that I'm sharing in that video are things that I've noticed as a handmade seller currently works to sell on Etsy, but it was tongue-in-cheek because almost all of them are not very sustainable long term and can lead to burnout, and that's kind of linked to what this video is about, so watch on and you will see why. But before I jump into number one, hello, I'm Kim. If you're new here, this is the Coffee and Craft podcast where I drink coffee, although I'm not drinking anything today, and I craft sometimes, but I'm not crafting anything today. And I try to keep you company while you work or craft. There you go. And I talk about all things to do with running a handmade business because that's what I do. All of that nonsense that you can kind of see in the background is handmade business gubbins, but I digress. That's the intro, this is the video. The first mistake that I see people making, and I've talked about this a lot in the past, but I don't think I've talked about it recently, it's making generic items. Ooh. This is it's not a controversial one, but I think as makers and creators, we don't want to admit that our items are kind of generic, but sometimes they are. And what I mean by generic is, could somebody buy something very similar to what you do in a high street store? If the answer is yes, babes, it's generic. And that's not to say that it's not good. It's not to say that you haven't put your heart and soul into it. It just means that you are competing with the high street. And as an online business, it's friction. Sometimes selling anything online is an uphill struggle. And when you're competing with high street stores that people can walk into, grab something, often at ridiculously cheap prices, and then just walk straight out with it, you're making a hard thing already harder. I had a friend who used to make macrame wall hangings, and I remember how depressed she was when we went into I'm not laughing. I remember her face. We went into a B&M store and we went into the home section, and it wasn't great, but it was a macrame wall hanging in the home section, and it was just like, well, what's the point? I've had that same moment myself. I used to make, I've actually got one kind of hanging up in the background there, that sparkly thing, that's there-ish. I used to make those sort of very sparkly festival gear, and you could only get them online. You could only get these sequined sparkly things online. There was nowhere on the high street selling them. And I just remember the night that I was sat in front of the TV relaxing with my husband, and an advert came on. I think it was Boohoo or Topshop or something like that, and they were selling their festival gear, sparkly robes like that, and I just thought, I probably said that too. My point is, the moment that the high street catches up with a trend, if you have based your business on that trend or just on that thing, it doesn't have to be a trend, all of a sudden you are going to notice the effect. So you must not try and make items that are too generic that can be found on the high street. Now, I'm not saying that you have to reinvent the wheel, but you can try and think outside the box and just try and find something that makes you unique. I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but that's my first thing. Being too generic is probably one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make. The second one is underpricing your items to compete with other people who are trying to compete by underpricing their items. Especially when these things are handmade, take a lot of time. I see some things online and I think, how are these people making not just profit? Forget profit for a second, because I do think that they're not making any profit. How are they even covering their costs? And this is why this video is linked to the one that I made last week, because this is one of those things that it's like the fastest track to burnout. You don't want to be selling something, and maybe let's just say that it's selling well and it's selling consistently, but you are underpricing yourself, so you are having to sell more of them and keep the wheels and the plates spinning faster and faster. There is a certain point that the wheels are going to fall off. You are the vehicle. Your wheels are going to fall off. Don't do that. It is not the only way to get sales, and it's a race to the bottom. I know that you've probably all heard that 1,000 times before, but it is true. Not to mention, I think people are willing to spend more on something that is handmade, like high quality. We're not just talking tat. And if I see something that's just been knocked right down, my immediate reaction is that it's tat. Price your items what they are worth and focus on quality. You might sell fewer items, but I've spoken about this in one of my recent videos. These are my handmade finished items, those blurry things in the background. I sell them on my website. I sell fewer of them than my lower ticket items, but I make more profit and revenue from them, which helps me pay for this dark room today. It's dark. We're going to move on. Don't underprice your items is what I'm saying. This is something that I am guilty of myself. One of the biggest mistakes that you can make if you sell seasonal items is not getting your seasonal items up on time. And when I say on time, okay, so it's a hard one to pinpoint when exactly you should get your items. Let's take Christmas, the holiday season, because that's a big part of a handmade business person's calendar. I would say September, maybe even earlier. Am I likely to get any Christmas items up in September? Probably not. I am renowned for being late. Most of you will know this already. It's like you do need to get your items up ASAP. I know we've all been into a high street store or a supermarket and we rolled our eyes because they've got Halloween stuff up and it's, summer hasn't finished. But they do that because people buy them. And I've done this myself. I've walked into a supermarket and it'd be like, oh my God, oh look, they've got the Christmas food up. Or, oh, for goodness sake. Oh, we should probably get one of these boxes of chocolates though, because they tend to go quite quickly and we don't want to miss out. Businesses put their items up early because they know despite the moaning and the eye rolling, people purchase them. And I talked about this in my last video again. It's like, especially when times are like they are, people tend to try and spread the cost out of really expensive times like the holiday season. So they will be sort of buying bits here and there where they can get away with it. And some people, for example, for autumn and Halloween, some people live for Halloween. It's just like they're just itching for summer to be over so they can get into spooky season. So they're buying early because they want to. Yeah, you don't need me to convince you as to why it's so important to get your items up early. It's a known thing. This is not new. I'm not sort of coming at you with any sort of new information. But I have noticed that, and I don't know if it is because of the whole economic thing at the moment, but I have noticed that it's become even more of a thing, if that makes sense, than it has been in the past. So it's just kind of ramped up a notch. So I'm telling this to you guys as much as I am to myself. We need to get our seasonal items up as soon as possible. Right. The regulars here will know that it's been a little while since I've been banging this drum, but you need to try and stand out from your competition. I know the advice out there is to check out what your competition is doing and to model what is working for them. I do see the logic behind that. The problem though is that the people giving this advice will always say, go check out what your competition is doing, model what's working, but don't copy. And of course, what it means is copying. So people will do exactly that. It doesn't matter if you go, but don't copy. They will go out and copy. So what you want to do is you want to absolutely look at what your competition is doing, but you want to try and identify how you can stand out from them. Because if you have too many people in a niche or too many people making a certain kind of product and it's too samey, then people just get fatigued at the sameness and they just scroll on past. And then what you've done is that you've made your item, which might be brilliant by the way, but you've made it forgettable. And you've made it a lot easier for people to just scroll on past it. You have to interrupt the scroll. You have to grab people's attention. And I promise you, you're not going to do that by being a cookie cutter version of what someone else has already done. So it's not just, your products themselves, but it's not just that. It can be your photographs, your packaging, your overall branding. It just something that helps people identify something as you and marks you out as different from everybody else. It's hard. I do get that. It is extra work, which is why so many people don't want to do it. Copying is easy. Trying to be a little bit more original and innovate and stand out, that takes graft, that takes work, and there's not many people who are willing to do that. But the ones that do stand out. Again, as I said earlier, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to be so original that you come up with ideas that have never been seen before. But to say that there are no new ideas in the world is just an excuse, and it's just usually said by people who want to let themselves off the hook. And when you're selling on a platform like Etsy, where you have just pages and pages of items, you have such a small window of time to try and grab someone's attention. So with something like your photographs, your colours, your branding, even your product, in fact, probably especially your product, you have to find ways to make it different, to stop the scroll, to grab people's attention. And again, that's not by being the same as everybody else on the page. I'll get off my high horse now. Let's move on to the last one. This one, I think some people might disagree with me on this one, but I think because I've been doing this for years now, how long have I been doing it for? 11 years. Wow. That's just running my business as a business for 11 years. I've been selling on Etsy for longer than that. So it's been a long ass time, guys. But over time, you learn the importance of saying no. And it was this part that kind of was off the back of last week's video that made me want to make this one. I see a lot of people jumping through hoops and thinking that they have to say yes to every little tweak, change, opportunity and offer that they get, despite the fact that it might seem like a good thing on the surface, but it translates long term as not so great. I'm being a bit vague. Let me break it down. Last week I was talking about things that worked on Etsy. Now I don't jump through all of their hoops. Does this mean I make fewer sales? Sometimes yes. But if you're saying no to something, you're saying yes to something else. And if I'm saying no to some sales, it's because it's, again, lower ticket items are the things that sell on Etsy. Absolutely fine with that. But sometimes it means I would have to do something to get more sales at a cost. And that cost is usually my time or my energy. And sometimes I want that more than an extra couple of orders. That time could be time spent with my family. That time could be spent doing something else in the business. Or it could just be me giving myself some downtime because I'm allowed that, Etsy. I say no all the time, and the more I do so, the more I see that there is real power in saying no. For example, on this channel, I've said no to collaborations, gifted content, a sponsorship deal, all because by saying yes to them, I would have had to have said no to something else, be that my time or my energy, or also the trust that I've built up with you guys here. That's just this side of my business, but the handmade physical product side of my business, things that I've said no to are markets and shows. I did them in the early days. Energy wise, they left me drained to the point that I don't want to do them, even though I know they would be amazing for the business, because markets and shows are a great way to get your stuff out there. And in this day and age, to make money if you're a handmade seller. I would love to make more content on that, but because I don't do them myself, I don't really feel like I'm the best person to do that. But my point is, I say no to markets and shows because I know that I would be on the floor energy-wise. So I say no to them so I can say yes to something else. Other things I won't do anymore are wholesale, getting my items out in other people's shops. It's just usually when there are other other people, other businesses involved, it tends to muddy the waters and make things more complicated. And I wanted to build a business that was going to be calm and not too stressful. I don't always have full control of that last one, but I'm doing my best and it seems to be working out well. Like I said, saying no it's going to be very personal, because what I say no to might be something that you desperately want to say yes to, and then the things that I say yes to might be things that you'd be like, eh. So it's what's the word I'm looking for? Subjective. What you will say no to will be different to what I say no to, and so on and so on. But ultimately, it's about just knowing what's important to you and putting boundaries in place so that your business grows with you in a way that is sustainable and doesn't burn you out. Saying yes to every opportunity, jumping through every hoop, be that on Etsy or elsewhere, it can end up putting you on the floor in terms of energy, and you are your business. So it's important to focus on you and what you find important and what you don't. And if you haven't watched last week's video, I'll stick it here for you to have a little gander at. I usually end the video here by going, ta-ra! I've been having some comments from people asking what I'm saying, because not everybody finishes conversations with ta-ra. It's just what we say around here, only it's usually said with a Welsh accent, so it's like ta-ra, but I can't say that. I could. I'm just saying goodbye, folks, alright? Bye-bye. Ta-ra.